Welcome to the Spirit of Business episode number 60, Starters and Finishers, with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Matt. I have something that I would love to get some of your wisdom on, which is about people who are really good at starting things and people who are really good at finishing things. And maybe there are people who are in between. They're really good at doing everything except the beginning and the end. I don't know about that. But I know, like I am typically a starter, and I had to really discipline myself to learn how to complete projects, because part of the way through something I would always have an idea that would feel profoundly inspired to me and obviously the thing that I should be doing now because there was so much energy in it, but then I would not complete what I'd started and then I never got to share it, and that's a very frustrating experience. Much bigger than that, I feel I meet very entrepreneurial people who do that kind of as their profession. They have brilliant ideas, but to me they don't get the satisfaction of taking the business all the way through to what it could become, because they're always on to another idea. But equally, I have clients who are terrified of getting started, but I know that if they're in a project and they've got to complete it and do all the things that need to be done that I would find so hard, they will dot every T. No, you don't dot T's, do you? Dot every I, cross every T. They'll do all the things step by step by step that take them all the way to the end, but they can't get moving in something. And I just wondered what you've worked with so many business owners, and I feel that it's something that is worth bringing out into the open and talking about what does it take to make something successful, because we're all going to have strengths and weaknesses in relation to this kind of topic.
Great topic, and there's a lot of thoughts that have gone through my head as you were introducing it. The first thing is, why is it important to start and finish things? And what you just said a minute ago was about that creates a successful outcome. And I think there's got to be a purpose as to why you need to start and finish things. Otherwise, what's the point? And so maybe there's something in that we'll talk about. The other thing that I notice about business owners, and I do strategic plans for people where it's a one-page plan where typically it has big picture thinking on the left-hand side of the page and detail-orientated thinking on the right-hand side of the page. And as you progress from the left to right, you go from being big picture, okay, through to then how we're going to do it. So you're visually thinking about, okay, well, this is where I want to get to, and over this time frame, and this is the purpose and the values and all the things that are really important from a business perspective. And so therefore it's very big picture orientated. And then as you move across the page, you're sort of going through the how and then getting into the detail of what do I have to do tomorrow and next week and the week after to get to that ultimate picture. So maybe I'm making the correlation between the two, and it'd be worthwhile to unpack this to see whether this is a thing or not, because I often talk about two different types of people, and those different types of people are big picture thinkers and detail orientated people. And I see that big picture thinkers are the ones that are quite easily, that comes to them as to say, oh, I can see where we can go to and what we can achieve and all the wonderful, amazing things, and, follow me and I'll take you there sort of type principle, And so if we then link that back to what you're talking to, that they're probably the creative entrepreneurial ones that could probably start things, okay? Because they've got no inhibitive barriers. Whereas a detail-orientated people, and I see this a lot in our business, because they're typically a type of personality type, where they won't have that. First of all, they don't have the big picture thinking. And secondly, when the big picture thinking people talk to the detail-orientated people, they say, well, hang on a minute, how are we going to get there? We're here today, how are we going to get? So they actually have to work forward. They almost have to, so the big picture people think, they look forward and then they start to have to work backwards, whereas the detail people go, I need to start here and work forward to see if that's possible or achievable, okay? So maybe there's something in the difference between big picture thinkers and detail orientated people, because you need both, by the way. And that's the reason why I actually have this plan on a page, because I actually am thinking about big picture and detail, put the two things together, you get a successful business. Because if you have just big picture thinkers without the detail, or detail without the big picture thinkers, you just don't get there, right? Some people are good at doing both. They can switch their brain between creative big picture down to the detail. Okay. Now, I don't see that very often, but there are people that can actually do that type of thing. So, coming back to your question around people starting and people, starting but not finishing, I think there could be something in that, and I like your thoughts around that concept that I just introduced then.
Well, I went to exactly the same place as you did, actually. I was thinking about that too, about the more visionary people. They're the people who will describe themselves as entrepreneurs and see themselves as entrepreneurial. And very often the more detail type people will not see themselves as entrepreneurial, or they'll see themselves as a business owner, but I'm not an entrepreneur, which is interesting because they make a business as successful as that entrepreneurial person does, actually. And so I think of them all, I don't see that distinction in terms of whether one is entrepreneurial or not. That's just a bit of a side thing. But actually, there's a light bulb that went off, or went on actually, in my mind while you were speaking about that, because I realized that as generally a more of a big picture, spontaneous, excitable type of person, the more I've disciplined myself to take care of the details, which has taken a kind of tremendous concentration of effort and a desire to do things really well or to do things beautifully. That's what the key was for me. If I want to do it beautifully, I actually have to make the bits and pieces beautiful. It doesn't work otherwise. But the more I've done that, something happened to me, which I think is really interesting in relation to this future or present orientation, is that I began to be able to project the future from the present. So the future and the present are kind of happening together. And so I think what you're drawing attention to is that if you're very future orientated, very visionary, you tend to be out there and you don't get things finished. If you don't have the right people on your team, it's going to be very frustrating. And vice versa. I don't know how much we need to master both. I know for me that it strengthened me a great deal to actually admit that I wasn't good at finishing things and learn how to do it. And I personally believe that that's one of the reasons why I was able to eventually attract into my business people at a high level. It's like if I hadn't put the yards in, so to speak, I think that I would still be a bit of a dreamer business owner. And I think my willingness to do stuff that was very unnatural for me created some kind of attraction around the business to be able to attract higher level, better people. Let's just put it like that. And I wonder if there's anything in that from your perspective.
There is. The starting point is the acknowledgement of it. And so when I talk about, this big picture, detail orientated, you watch people's faces automatically go, oh yeah, that's right, I'm a big picture person, or I'm a detail person. You can straight away, people start to align themselves with what they are. And I think that acknowledgement or recognition is the best starting point, because you've got something to work from there. Because if you don't really recognize that, you wonder why, going back to your original question, why don't you start things or why don't you finish things? And this is kind of the key to it. So it's recognition and acknowledgement of that you're a type of personality, which means that typically you're going to have a barrier, okay? And the barrier is either to start something or to finish something. So I think, and that's why I go through a process with it, and that's why it's explain the big picture. Sorry, explain the one-page plan and be clear about the fact that if you're a detail-orientated person, you're going to struggle with the left-hand side of the page. And if you're detail, you're going to struggle with the right-hand side. So it's vice versa. And so from that point of view, the acknowledgement is the starting point. And that's what you did. You acknowledged that you were something, okay? Because you recognized that you can easily start, but you not easily finish. But as soon as you said, oh, actually, I know why I can easily start. So therefore, because I am that style of person, but I do need to either be able to flip the brain or whatever you want to call it to be able to then do the detail, or surround yourself with people, as you say, that can actually do that, okay? Now, there's a bit in between though, and I noticed this about me. This is a personal thing about, starting or finishing. I can do the big picture thing and get really excited about something, and that's and I feel it's such a great place to be when you actually start to get that idea and think, oh, this is what we can achieve and where we want to go to, and it's all exciting and the shiny bright new thing. And then I can lose momentum after a period like there's a bit in between that gets the hard bit. All right, so this is where that finishing piece sort of happens, is that you got to go through this hard bit, and there's always a hard bit. Okay, and that's where you've got to, that's where that discipline you talked about to get through that part of it, and that's where you've got to hold and either do it yourself or get other people involved in it. Now, the other really interesting part about it that I'll talk about is that if you're going to get other people to be involved that are making up your differences, I won't say deficiencies because it's not a deficiency, but a difference. If you're big picture, then and you need detail, then you need to get the detailed people on board. Now, if you're big picture, thing with that is that's all comes down to communication, because you have to take the detailed people on a journey where they believe what you are actually saying. And I see this time and time again, and I see this in my business because I run an accounting firm. Okay, for one of them. We do lots of things, but I have a lot of detail-orientated people in my organisation because they're accountants by trade. They're very linear, detail-orientated people. If I stand up the front and talk big picture to them, and and talk with my enthusiastic hat on about, oh, this is where we're going to go and this is what we're going to do and all sorts of type of stuff, you can just watch them glaze, or you watch them go, yeah, whatever, and they switch off. And the reason why they switch off is because they're going, I can't see, and as you said really, really well, they can't see the future in the present. And so there's a really good point that you made there. And so therefore my job all the time is to do that, is to actually go take them from the present to see that the future is actually achievable, because they'll be cynical in their thought process. And I'm not saying anything derogatory about accountants or about my team. It's just the way that we think, okay? And my responsibility is to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the strategy and the ability to take the idea all the way through to sort of the implementation and then the success of it.
To me, this is so important because one of the things that I've seen in lots of businesses actually is, and this happens especially with the big picture people, is they get very frustrated with the detail people and they think there's something wrong with them. I mean, seriously, people can be I'm shocked, they can be abusive and they can be really rude and dismissive of people who don't think the same as them. We'll come to the other way around in a moment, but I've worked with quite a lot of people like that. And those relationships then fall apart, and big picture people will very easily think that the relationship has fallen apart because the other person couldn't see the big picture. And they will never think it's because I wasn't able to share the big picture with them in a language that they can understand. So I'm thinking that one of the reasons your business is so successful is because you are able to connect with the big picture and you're able to translate that. And you have the self-discipline to go through the gap. And I'm wondering whether that is a mark of a really successful business owner, is that they're willing to not just be themselves. I'm not just the big picture person, or I'm not just the detailed person, but I'm willing to go to that other place enough so that A, I understand it, B, I really care about the details enough so that if I've got people working with me on the details, I care about what they're doing because it's part of the fulfillment of the big picture, and C, so that I can actually communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them. Because otherwise we stay in, like, I'm in my amazing visionary tower over here and you're in your spreadsheet tower over there, and never the twain shall meet. And I wouldn't be surprised if quite a lot of businesses fall apart just because of that.
And it's interesting, I think there's natural enemies to both, okay? And the gap in between that I spoke about before is about how purposeful you are and how much you believe in your idea to begin with. So because the detailed people, as you say, they can actually get quite rude, okay? Because they come from a cynical lens, and the cynical lens says that's not going to work. We can't do that, and it becomes like sucks the oxygen out of you, sucks the life out of you sometimes. And you're saying, I'm trying to actually, do something really meaningful or purposeful or great or whatever it actually is, and then you sort of start to talk about this to people who are more detail orientated. And they say, it's not going to work. You can't do it. All these really, you got rocks on your head, and it is. It's quite rude sometimes what they say. You're a dreamer or whatever it is. I've heard it all, right? And so I hear it, and then I watch, and this is probably what happened to me with ideas that I've gone. Either I start to believe them. Okay, and they might be right, by the way, and this is why you've got to be really conscious of what you're hearing, and the messages that they're coming from, and they're the voices that are saying it's not going to work, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And I've come from this place and it could be in that sort of creativity, dreaming sort of type principle. And so unless you really believe in what you're talking about and doing, that's what's going to happen. With that valley that we spoke about in between, the hard bit, you've got to be super resilient and super focused to ensure that you get through that bit, because that's the detailed people that are saying you can't, and I'm not on board with you because I don't believe in what you believe in. I don't believe we're going to get there. Okay, so you have to also find the people that are because a lot of that negativity is actually good because it's solving problems for you to get to where you need to get to. So you have to address these problems and these issues that the detailed people are actually, saying to you. So you go back to your question about why you can start and why you can't finish. Some of that's because of that gap in between, that the detailed people don't believe and they're not on the same page as the big picture. Okay.
And I think that thing about when you're in that gap, like one of the things I've noticed is if you can listen to them and take the essence of what they're saying, which is what you said, they bring out the problems that you probably haven't addressed yet. And if you can address those problems to an extent that they start to walk towards you in the gap, that's really powerful. What's not so great, and of course you start to walk towards them. If you run towards them and end up on their side of the gap kind of thing, that's not going to work. They're probably not going to run towards you and end up in a kind of dreamy, big picture state. But to be able to listen to the criticisms or the cynicism is such a powerful way of stress testing an idea, as long as you can keep your own spirit. And I think this is where this whole, this podcast is called The Spirit of Business. It's like, how can you listen to everything that's offered to you, but still hold the core spirit of what it is that you're all about? Because if you go too far with that cynicism, you lose the spirit, and then you start to doubt what you're doing, rather than just listening and taking it as feedback that improves what you're doing.
And this is where it becomes so difficult to know where the truth lies in terms of, is this idea something that I shouldn't waste my time on, compared to, is this idea something that I should take all the way through? And that's why I think it comes down to the concept of how much you believe in it and the value attributed to it from your own personal, to hold that resilience and that spirit. And so you have to check in to say, how important is this in my life? How important is this in my business? How important is this idea and the impact that it's going to have and the benefit to people that it'll produce? Because that becomes the momentum to get you through that bit, okay, and to problem solve. Because most problems have got a solution to them. It's only when they don't that it's going to defeat it drastically. But that bit in between, as what you're talking about, the spirit becomes the momentum and becomes the motivation to actually get you through that hard time.
And perhaps the spirit's almost like a vortex, because what people who have spirit, rather than just passion or sometimes people are very passionate about what they're doing, but it doesn't draw people in. It's like attracts and repels people at the same time. But that spirit, when it's really working strongly, that's like a vortex that attracts people. It brings those people closer to you, step by step. So it builds support around the idea. Well, as long as you have that spirit. When we lose our spirit, then we lose the attraction around whatever it is we're about. Because in business, we are always creating something that at least we've never done before. Other people might have done it or they might not have done it, but it's always in a unique situation. And that's why we need spirit, because we're always to some extent in unknown territory.
And the other really important parts of that is energy, because you not only have to have spirit, but you have to have energy, because the hard bit in between, as you said, you spoke about at the start of this podcast, starting and finishing. Well, when the hard bit's about the finishing, by the way, so that's because if you don't get through the hard bit, then you're not going to finish typically, okay? And so the hard bit there is you need to not only believe in it and have the spirit of it and the conviction for it, but you also need to have your energy in the right spot to take you through that, because if you don't have an energy to do it, that's going to defeat that as well, because you go, oh, too hard, I'm tired, I give up sort of type principle, which sometimes might be the right answer, by the way, because that's where you're testing how important the idea was in the first place.
Yes, that's. I think exactly that thing about like how do you discern? I think that when somebody gives me a message, even if it's an unwelcome message, there's always a reason for it. I always see that. I'm sure I've talked about this before. It's like life is talking to me through all the people around me. And some of those messages are really unwelcome. Some of them are welcome. Some of them are useful. Some of them are kind of like grittily useful. I know it's useful. I don't want to hear it, but I know that it's good. And to develop the ability to discern what's useful. My theory is it's all useful. The thing that I've learned is that emotion that gets wrapped up with those things is not useful. If somebody's emotional about it, so if they're like really annoyed with me because I'm too much in the clouds or whatever, their emotion is their emotion. That's not mine. So I bin the emotion immediately, or actually I don't bin it. It's just like that belongs with you, that doesn't belong with me. But usually, even when somebody's very emotional, what I discovered is that in the heart of it, the thing that they're saying is usually true. And it's quite annoying actually, because it would be much easier to say, oh my goodness, you're just totally emotional, go away and leave me alone and come back when you can talk rationally or something. But actually, the problem is that even then that they'll say something over and over again, and maybe they're really angry or they're really upset or something. But in there's a kernel of truth. And I think the most powerful thing I've found is when I can have the presence to be able to take the kernel, leave the emotion, let the person deal with themselves and all the crap that's going on in their head, but actually not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Take whatever the essence is and apply that. Because if you think, then there's so much information you're given all the time. If you can receive the essence of that all the time, it strengthens. What I see is this strengthening of what you're doing. It's like it creates beyond resilience. It creates something that's almost unbreakable because you're actually all contributing to it in your own way.
And the thing that I always find for me too is the articulation of the idea. So you might have the idea of the thought, and then when you start to explain it to maybe people that are going to help you get there, which is maybe part of the detail orientated people, as well as the creative ones, I find that sometimes I can fall down at that point of articulation, which is good because it's pressure testing even the simplicity of what you're trying to. And so I break it down from the complex to the simple to be able to explain it, because if you can't explain it well, that's also part of the why it never gets off the ground in the first place, because you haven't thought it through well enough to be articulated enough to communicate it well enough so everybody comes on your journey. And that's part of the essence of it as well, as what you talk about.
Yes, and again, it's so easy to believe that if somebody doesn't understand it, they're being stupid. That I think this is the biggest thing that we're really talking about here, is not even about whether you're good at starting things or whether you're good at finishing things, but are you able to connect with the people who you need in order to create a successful project from start to finish in a way that's respectful and where you can all make your contribution? Because so often things fall apart because somebody doesn't even want to listen. Or, we all can so easily become arrogant, like my perspective is right and yours is wrong, rather than there's truth in what I'm saying and there's truth in what you're saying. And I think relationships I've met many entrepreneurs. I can think of many conversations I've had where people are kind of swearing about their financial person, for example, because they're always going through the details, and they just think the guy's completely stupid.
Yeah.
It's like the minute he doesn't agree with me, he's stupid. I'm clever and he's stupid. And it seems like, to me, almost a stupid thing to be having to talk about, except that it's really common that people just think that other people are stupid.
And so the word that comes to mind a lot from both types of people is the word openness. Prepared to actually come to the conversation not with fixed ideas and closed-mindedness associated with your personal viewpoint, but to be open enough to consider and think and put yourself in the other person's shoes. And there's an element of empathy that goes on with that too, because you say, well, I'm empathetic about the way you think. And so, and I'm okay with that. And you're adding value. And also this concept of value, because the arrogance that you spoke about before is that if you think you're right, it means you're also don't believe that the other person that contributing to the conversation has any value. And I think that's also wrong. So it's openness and consideration for the other person's value also makes for such a great way. Sorry, that's my dog barking in the background.
Hi, Billy.
And I find that this is something that if you come to those conversations, they're so much more joyful, okay, than if you go to a conversation it's just got this closed, shut down, the energy just is horrible. And so part of the formula that I've learned over the years is actually saying that and framing a conversation and saying, hey, I've got this idea, and it's not fully formed, and I could be being completely crazy, but just hear me out, and I'd like your thoughts on it. Okay, so you're kind of asking for an openness. You're asking for, you're actually saying to them, I value your opinion in this, and but I also need you to value my idea and my thought process. So the openness and the value exchange is such a more joyful experience than, okay, we're going to go in this path and this is where we're going to go, and I reckon we're going to go there. It's like I'm being quite definitive in the thought in that statement, and I'm almost devaluing what they think because I haven't actually asked them to think of it in this way or framed it in that particular way. And I've found that that's helped a lot. Doesn't always work, but it helps to at least get people talking and being on the same page to problem solve, to first of all throw up ideas and then problem solve those ideas collectively.
Well, it's really respectful as well, because you're saying it's not all about me and I don't have all of it, and you have a part of this, and so there's an invitation immediately between you and the other people, rather than a kind of like, I've got something that I want to dump on you. I want to dump my brilliance on you, so to speak. I feel like I'm being a little bit harsh, but I think just it's so common that we need to be really direct about it.
But we should value
the other people. Thing that's interesting.
But I was just going to say, we should value the people that are different to us, and sometimes we don't.
Yes, that's exactly the point.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think
one of the things in relation to open-mindedness is it's really easy to feel that if you're more of the ideas person, you automatically think that you're open-minded, and I think that people who are more detail-oriented, a lot of them think, oh, I know that I'm really closed-minded. They kind of know that, but they're down on themselves about that, rather than seeing that they bring something which is really valuable to the other side. We both bring something that's really valuable because we bring what others don't have so strongly. So it comes back to the way we relate with each other as human beings. Do we respect each other fundamentally? Or are we so much in our own world that everything has to revolve around that? And so we are, I think, talking about what can make a business successful, because a business is something that needs to start and produce and finish over and over and over again in cycle after cycle after cycle and project after project. So this whole conversation in many ways goes to some of the keys of how we can create success around our own personal profile, which is going to have strengths and areas where we're not strong.
Which means there's a high degree of self-reflection there, because I think it's good that you made the point that creative people would see themselves as being open-minded, and detail-orientated people couldn't be seen to be closed-minded. But that's not always the case, okay? And so that self-reflection of saying, well, actually, I'm creative doesn't mean I'm open. It doesn't mean I'm open, or I'm detailed doesn't mean I'm closed. But just the acknowledgement, and I find that, and you don't want to label people either, because that's the wrong thing to do too. But to say, look, I value your opinion in this because you think a way that I don't think, and that's why it's really important for me to get a different perspective on this. Or I had a conversation earlier today, actually, on this very thing. I said, look, I've got this idea. I haven't fully formed it. But I also don't want to spend any energy on it if I think it's completely not the right thing to do. So I spoke to somebody who I know it's great at shutting down things really quickly, or finding the problem really quickly and going, yeah, that's the problem. I'm not going to be able to ever get to that particular finishing point. And so, but if I hadn't have given the other person permission or spoken about the other person's value, it would have been a very different conversation that would have been tense and quite annoying, compared to something where you go, hey, what do you reckon? And and as I said before, I think that's a really strong formula, is the acknowledgement part of it, and then sort of, openness and the value, and seeing value in all aspects of different people's personality types.
So what happened to your idea in that conversation? I'm intrigued now.
Yeah.
I don't need to know the idea. I just want to know, how did it work?
It's still being considered.
Okay.
So
it wasn't put in the bin.
It wasn't put in the bin. So I said, look, there's the idea. I haven't fully formed it. Here's the parts of it, but these are the other parts that I haven't fully worked out yet. I'm sort of asking you to see whether we can actually form a full picture, okay, that's actually going to work from this point of view. And so the person will come in straight away and go, no. And I'll go, yep, that's cool, okay. But is there enough in the positive aspect of the outcome for this that would mean that it's worthwhile solving these things that are difficult to solve? And then that's where we're at the moment, because the person's now gone away to think about it, okay, about further about the value of it. And so it was if I had gone into the conversation differently, saying I got an idea and I want it to work, or this is the way I'm thinking, without acknowledging that, it would have been a very short, abrasive conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful outcome, actually, because if somebody goes away thinking about it, they're really engaged and they're taking responsibility. They can't come back to you and just trash your idea, because you've given them responsibility to engage with the idea. And there's almost a pride, like you don't then come back and you have to come back with something responsible and interesting and engaged. So that seems to me, and that also shows, because sometimes we want instant approval. Perhaps there's a bit of a child showing up and it's like, oh, I've got an idea, and you just want people to pat you on the back and say, oh, you're amazing. And it doesn't give you very much, because it's actually really only amazing if you can do the idea and fulfill on it and finish it. It's not having an amazing idea that's really going to give you the fulfillment. So, but that can come up, sometimes it pops up if we're feeling a bit insecure or something. So just to recognize that the process of starting and finishing something, even around just the idea stage of it, is something that happens over time. I think that's a really important part in the communication. People can change so much in a couple of days. And if you don't give them that time, you just judge them on their snap response, you never got the chance to see them. And I do this. Somebody will say, hey, Sarah, this is a really amazing idea. And I'll say, oh, I'm not sure. And if I sit with it for an hour or two, I'll come back and say, hey, you know what? Here's a way we could do it. But if it's thrown at me too fast, everything in me just kind of stands up like I can't handle it and I have to defend myself. But if I'm given some time and some responsibility, I'll connect with it and I'll start to process it through my system. And then it's like, oh yeah, I think we could do that actually. Or I could add this piece in and make it work. So this is very much about how we operate as human beings.
It's really funny what you just said then, though. You said, hey, Sarah, I've got a really amazing idea. Now, what do we typically do when it's like, I'm a comedian, I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to tell you a joke that you're going to laugh at, right? Typically, we'll go, yeah, try me. I'm not going to laugh.
Yes, exactly.
And so therefore we go into that space. And if somebody says, hey, Sarah, I've got an amazing idea, you're going to go, oh, yeah, tell me about it. And maybe I don't think it's as amazing as what you do. But just that, there was like 3 or 4 words that almost polarized you to then going, well, I don't think it's that a good idea. But if they had to come here and say, look, I've got an idea, right, Sarah, and I'd really like you to consider this because, you know, I value your opinion and you're really smart in these particular areas. And this is my idea. What do you think? You know, so that's a very different conversation. Now you're evolved enough to walk away and consider it and then come back again. But not everybody would do that. And this is where I think the power is. So even in the smallest of 4 or 5 words, you can set up a very different conversation.
And that's right, because I don't even want to think of myself as the kind of person who says no or pours cold water on people's ideas, because I think of myself as being, you know, open-minded and all of those things that we've been talking about. So I actually hate that feeling when I get into this defensive, like, but there's something in me that is doing exactly what you demonstrated. It's like something comes up and just says no. And I think it's because the energy, actually, when somebody comes at you like that, it is a very overwhelming energy. And so there is a sense almost of self-defense, but it's an energetic thing that's going on. And when I go away, I can process the energy, I can calm that down. And then I can consider, because I'm trying to apply the principle I said earlier, that if somebody offers me something, there is value in it. So even if they came at me with it in a way that kind of put some hackles up a little bit, I still know there's value in it. And so I have to kind of find the place where I can take it seriously, and see what I can do with it. And that can actually be a bit of a process. So I'm not surprised. I think, yeah, most people would say, oh, well, forget it. Didn't feel good, didn't feel comfortable, whatever, I'm not interested. And then an opportunity is lost. It's not only an opportunity for an idea to become something, but it's an opportunity for people to create something together. And really that's the satisfying part of it in the end, isn't it? We create things together that make a difference to people.
So if I go back to the original questions about some ideas, or some people find it hard to start and some people find it hard to finish, where it's evolved to is really about the type of personality that you are, but then and the natural enemies to that, for things not to actually get to fruition. And sometimes they shouldn't get to fruition. Sometimes they are just things that you shouldn't start or you shouldn't finish, so to speak, right? And so from that point of view, I think that it's important to go through the process. But what's been good from this conversation is it really does highlight and acknowledge how to do it.
Yes. And the skills that are required that we actually need to cultivate to be able to do that how. It's not just like an automatic, okay, now I know how to do it, now I can apply the formula. Actually, we need to grow the skills all the time, cultivate those skills within us to be able to listen, to be able to respect, to be able to bring things to people in a way that creates attraction, a movement towards it, rather than a push away response. So there's quite a lot of capability we can develop around this.
A lot of discipline too, because you can know this stuff but still get caught up in the trap. And you know, And even though you know this stuff, and even though that I've practiced some of it, every now and again I catch myself going, oh, that wasn't very supportive of an idea or something like that. And
you know this stuff, and still that little boy or little girl or whatever it is pops up and says, no, I just want some instant gratification. Or I just want to squash your idea completely so I can feel good.
There's a bit of ego in it. So I think that really it's about catching yourself in those moments.
Yes, a good deal of self-mastery, I would say.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's very cool. It's an interesting discussion. Thank you for taking it beyond my initial people who are good at starting things or people who are good at finishing.
It's been a great chat once again. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you for listening to The Spirit of Business with Matt Murphy and Sarah McCrum. We'll be back next week with another episode. You'll find the show notes with links and other useful information on our website, spiritofbusiness.live. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends.